Hey everyone, I am super excited to present our next guest for Founder Stories. He's a man that needs no formal introduction. Just Google his name and you'll see all the incredible accomplishments that he has done. So he has been the president of Startbucks. He's been on the board of Startbucks. He's an author. He's a world-renowned speaker. So I would like to introduce you to my good friend, Howard Behar. So first of all, Howard, thank you so much for joining us on this show.
Thanks for having me.
So Howard, let's take it all the way back. You are 75 years young. You're a man that has energy more than a 20-year-old, full of compassion and values. But let's take it back to where did this all start from? How did Howard become Howard? So why don't you take us back of where you're from and what was your upbringing like?
Well, I was the son of two immigrants, one from Bulgaria and one from Latvia. My mother came when she was 9 years old in 1917, and my father came when he was 15 years old in 1911. So, I was raised by I wasn't born until after the Depression, and I was raised by two Depression-era parents. And so those values of being thoughtful, caring for others, just came from them. I learned those skills from my mom and my dad. And my dad had a small mom and pop grocery store, and he served a little neighborhood in the north end of Seattle. And in those days, there were charge accounts for the people that lived in the neighborhood, and there was a little book that he'd write the charge in, and then once a month he'd send a bill out, and he would go deliver the groceries, do all the things that we take for granted today. Now delivery has come back, but in those days delivery was prevalent. That's what you did. And so I grew up in that little grocery store. Every day after school, I would come to that grocery store. My mom was working there. My dad was working there. And I remember one day, it was probably one of the first big lessons I ever got about life and about people. And I didn't, of course, recognize it at the time, but over the years, of course, it became more meaningful. And my dad was ringing up on the cash register. He was ringing up a sale for one of his local customers. And so he asked me to go get a couple of baskets of strawberries. And so I went to the back of the store and I brought up 2 baskets of strawberries. And my dad took those baskets of strawberries and put them in the bag, and the people left. And I was old enough to realize, I was about 8, and I was old enough to realize that my dad hadn't rung those up on the register. In those days, the registers weren't electronic. You pressed the button that you wanted, and then you pulled the crank and it went bing like that. And so every time he was ringing something up, it would go bing. And then he had this little cash drawer that he put the money in. And I said, Dad, you forgot to ring those up on the cash register. And he just looked at me and he said, son, not everything we do in life should we get paid for, or do we need to get paid for. These people are not just our customers, they're our neighbors and our friends. And I happen to know that they love strawberries. And I also know that they're having tough times economically right now. So it's just my way of helping them out a little bit. And that was such a valuable lesson. You don't always need to get paid for things. There's so many times that we have an opportunity to give to others, and we need to take advantage of that. And so I learned a valuable lesson that really helped me later on in life, because I thought about that a lot, about what that meant and how you served others. And because of those kinds of experiences, and I had uncles that were in the jewelry business, uncles that were tailors, uncles in the pawn shop business. And I used to go visit them all on Saturday when I was a little kid. They were all in downtown Seattle area. My mom used to let me get on the bus when I was 10 years old and go downtown, and I would go stop at everybody's store, and they always loved to see me because I was the baby of the family. And so I grew from that, and I watched how they did things. It was all retail, it was not untypical of the immigrant families, even the immigrant families today, and where you'll see Koreans in dry cleaning businesses, and you'll see people in 7-Elevens and all those kinds of things. And so I learned how they ran small businesses, how they treated their people, how they treated those human beings they call customers. And it really formed my life. And so I stayed in the retail business, or the consumer products business, for my whole life, basically. And probably because of that, I was used to it. I liked it. I liked the interaction with people, and I was an outgoing guy, and I loved to serve people. And so that formed me.
Right. Wow. I mean, it's incredible. So let me ask you this, looking in hindsight, after this incredible career that you have, and taking it, and looking at the upbringing that you had, immigrant parents and parents instilling on you all these incredible lessons and values, how is that, so now when you look back at it, how has that shaped the man you've become after your whole entire career until now?
Well, when I was in my mid 20s, I worked for I worked for a furniture company, a furniture rental company, and I was the director of merchandising, and one day I got promoted, and never you're looking at a guy that barely got out of high school, had a couple of years of community college, and my best subject was beer, and by the time I got through those 2 years, I graduated to single malt scotches, which I'm still good at. And I worked for that company for years, and one day my boss came in my cubicle and he sat down in front of me and he said, "Howard, there's something I want to talk to you about." Well, I don't know about you, Ephraim, but if somebody that matters to you comes in and says there's something they want to talk to you about, a little red flag goes up in your head, right? Oh, it's either oh, what did I do now, or whatever. And so it was a kind of an moment for me. And he said, "Howard, you've done such a wonderful job. We'd like to promote you to vice president." Never in my wildest imagination did I ever think that I would get the opportunity to be vice president of a public company. And here my boss was offering me the job, a raise, and I was in a cubicle at the time, and I was going to get an office. I mean, big deal, for me at that time, and recognition that I'd done a good job. So they had parties for me and lots of recognition. And one day I was standing at the elevator, and the chairman of the board, a guy named Walker Treese, came up to me and he put out his hand. He said, "Howard, I know I'm not the first to congratulate you, but I just want to extend my congratulations on a well-deserved promotion. I know you're going to make a great contribution to this company." And then he said that three little word, "but there's something I'd like to talk to you about." So, I was 27, he was in his 50s at the time. It was like God was talking to me, and particularly in those days. This was in the 70s, You didn't talk back to your bosses, you just listened. And so I said, "Yes, Walker, what is it?" And he says, "Well, one of the things I've noticed about you is you always wear your heart on your sleeve. You always show your emotions." And yeah, I did. I was known for that. And he said, "If you want to be a great executive, you're going to have to learn to hold those emotions a little closer to your vest." That old adage, never let them see you sweat. And then the second thing he said, the other thing I've noticed is you're always willing to share your opinion. And that was very true about me. If somebody asked a question or there was a subject on the table, I was always willing to give my 2 cents worth. And the other thing he said, if you want to be a great executive, you might think about how being a little more thoughtful. Don't just share your opinion. You might say something like, "Let me think about it for a couple of days and I'll get back to you," to show that you're a thoughtful person. So as he's talking, I'm thinking, why did they promote me? They knew who I was. Why did I get this promotion? So I left that day really kind of not knowing. I was kind of afraid at that point in time. Geez, I wanted to be a good executive, but how was I going to change? And how was I going to be something that Walker wanted me to be? And I went through a period of about 3 or 4 months trying to change, and I just couldn't change. I got really depressed. And I thought, from a guy that got in early at work every day to a guy that started to come later and wanted to be in meetings to didn't want to be in meetings. And I finally decided, I was going to leave the company because I just couldn't take the pressure anymore of trying to be something I wasn't. And so I made a decision to resign. And the morning I was going to resign, I walked into the office. I got in early because, I was going to resign that day. And a guy that was another co-vice president, a guy named Jerry, said to me, "Hey, Howard, you got time for a cup of coffee?" I had time for anything because I was resigning that day. And I said, "Sure." And we sat down, and Jerry just looked at me. He said, "Howard, what the hell is wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "The guy that we all supported to be the next vice president, you're not that guy anymore. From a guy that we all depended on to speak his mind and to show his passion and his emotion, all of a sudden it looks to me like you're in it for yourself because you're not really being part of the team and not helping the team move along." And I had never related that story to anybody because I was too embarrassed. I was too young. I didn't know what it meant. And I related the story about my interaction with Walker. And he said, "Oh, Walker didn't mean that." I said, "Jerry, I was there. Walker meant every word that he said. And anyway, I'm going to resign today." He says, "You're not resigning. We're going to go talk to Walker." So we did. And the truth of the matter is Walker did mean everything that he said. He came from a different generation of leaders. But we made peace. And over the next year, a guy gave me a book. One of my mentors gave me a book to read about how to become a whole human being. you know. And in the book, the first chapter said, you need to identify your core values. Up until that point, I was just Howard being Howard. I never thought about who I was or what my values were. It wasn't, I was just living it out. What my parents taught me, I never thought about it. It just was who I was. And so I started to read this book, and it said, here's a list of 300 core human values. Get it down to 8 to 10 core values. Well, I started on that project. God, it took me forever trying to get from 300 down to 8. I got it down to 50, and I was just stuck. And I left it for a while, and a month later, I came back at it. And finally, I got it down to about 8. Then the second chapter of the book, it says, take those core values and define what they mean to you in words. Because otherwise, they're just a word. If you say, I'm an honest person, what is that? And that's your core value. What does that mean? How does that word turn into actions, into decisions in your life? So I did that exercise. And then the next chapter of the book said, create a mission statement for yourself. I never heard of that word, mission statement. What does that mean? And companies didn't have a mission statement in those days. Mission statement was make a lot of money. That was a mission statement, in those days. And so I worked on a mission statement. And because I was in the furniture business, my mission was kind of just baseline. It was, I wanted to be really recognized as a great leader in the home furnishings industry. And over the years, I've changed that, and I plagiarized something that happened at Startbucks. And my mission today is every day I want to nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. Wow. And then the next chapter of the book talked about identify in either 4 or 5 sentences or words how you want to live your life. And I created my 6 Ps. And my 6 Ps go like this. The first P is everything I do in my life has to have a purpose greater than myself. In other words, it has to be enhancing life of other people. And then the second P is passion. If you're going to do something bigger than yourself, greater than yourself, then you might as well be passionate about it and yell it from the highest mountaintops and let everybody know what you're here to do. The third P is persistence. In the river of life, there are rocks in our rivers. And we don't always know where they are, but we're going to hit them along the way. And, in those times we have a choice. Do we go over them, under them, through them, around them, or do we blow them up, or do we just avoid them? And so each of us are going to have to deal with the rocks that we hit. And persistence matters in life. You got to get through those things. And then the fourth P is patience. You'd think that patience is the opposite of persistence, but it isn't. Patience is realizing that not everything comes in the time that you want it to come. And sometimes you have to have the patience to get around it. You got to keep working at it, keep working at it, keep working at it. And so, most important person you have to have patience with is yourself, because we get impatient as people. And then you have to have patience with the people that you're working with or your families, whatever it happens to be. And then the fifth P is performance. Performance matters in this world. You either get the job done or you don't. And, we don't like to be measured, but the facts are we're measured every day. Our friends measure us, our spouses, our significant others measure us, our children measure us, our coworkers measure us, and our bosses measure us. And so we have to get used to being measured. And the most important person we have to perform for is us. Right. Every night I go home and I look in the mirror and I say, Howard, how did you do today against my mission and my values? And I have goals, written goals as well. And then the final P, people. Everything we do in life is about serving people. I don't care what your job title is. I don't care what you do in your life. There's only one reason any of us exist, and that's to serve others. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, fire chief, rabbi, barista, it doesn't make any difference. We're here to serve people. And so those 6 Ps inform my life and how I do things. So, I went from a guy that didn't know anything about myself to a guy that on paper, I wrote all of this down. Let's see if I have it. Somewhere I do. I did. So I carry this with me no matter where I go.
Now, is that the original 6 Ps?
It has my 6 Ps, my mission statement, and my core values. And so, because it's too easy for us to forget under stress or under, when something's going really well, we forget. Something's going really bad, we forget. And so I always keep this around to remind myself. I know it by heart, but I find under stress, I may forget some things and I get caught up in the moment. And so I've had this with me it's changed over time, but over 40 years.
Wow.
So way over 40 years, almost 50 years.
Yeah, I believe we should switch that for the resume. Instead of having a resume when you apply for a job or anything else, you should provide that.
Yeah, who are you? When I interviewed people, I didn't care what they knew. I wanted to know how they cared. I wanted to know who they were as people, what mattered to them, how did they live their life, what their values were. Those were the things. Then I'd ask the questions about, well, what do you know?
Right. Wow. So what were you currently going through? I'm assuming, how old were you when you created your six P's? You read this book that
That
transformed
was in my mid to late 20s.
mid to late 20s. We're always trying to, people are constantly searching for meaning and trying to evolve. So like, first of all, at that time in life, you were just promoted to vice president. You were about to resign. You weren't sure what's going on. Your parents did an incredible job in raising you and instilling the values that they knew, but you want a quest for your own, your own identity.
Right.
What were you at that current age, if you're able to recall, because multiple people are in that stage, of 20, between 25 and 29, which is trying to identify and trying to create their values. So if you recall, like, what were you looking for then? What were you going through?
Well, during the time I did this, I was looking for sanity.
Mm.
I was trying to figure out who I was so that the next time a walker came up to me and said, Howard, you need to change, I could have an intelligent conversation about myself and why I was the way I was. And then, it wasn't like Walker was asking me to change the color of my shoes or the style of my slacks. He was asking me to change Howard. And Howard didn't have a foundation to have a conversation about that. So that was the most important thing. And then I was like everybody else. I was trying to figure out what I wanted in my life. Where was I headed? What were the things I wanted to accomplish? At the same time I was doing this exercise, I started setting goals and doing affirmations about myself. And so I said, I started to develop 1, 3, and 5 year plans about my life, what I wanted to accomplish, and I had a bunch of different headings: spirituality, materiality, uh, uh, knowledge, relationships, family, spouse, a bunch of different headings. And I'd write goals underneath all of those to decide what I wanted to accomplish in my life. And then, that was the way I directed my life. There's an old adage, and you've heard it, I'm sure, if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there.
Yeah.
So I was trying to create a path for myself.
Wow. So, the difference, I guess, is that, most people at that age, especially even later, we always talk about it and creating these things, but you actually got to work and did it. But another point I want to bring out is, like, that radical self-inquiry that you did, in facing ourselves and our biggest fears of actually facing ourselves to do this work is something that holds all of us back.
Yeah.
Self-fear, self-doubt, insecurities. What are we going to find when we actually do this work sometimes is something that's a big blocker. How can people get past that fear in order to do this? They create, find out their 6 Ps, create that 5-year goal, break their inner fear and insecurities and everything.
You got to write it down. Thinking about it is fine, but if you don't write it down, so you have a document to look at and a document to refer to all the time, it won't happen. It's got to be something more formal than I want or I think. You have to write it down. And so, look, when I was in those early years, I was very insecure. I didn't have a college degree, and I was working with people from Harvard and all these people that had these great resumes, and I didn't. What I had was street knowledge. And over time, I still was insecure about it, even into my mid 40s about that. But I got more confident in myself as I accomplished more. But, even then, I still look back at, saying, I missed something by not going to the university, not because that would add to my resume so much now, but what I would have learned to do. I would have been able to do things much quicker, and I would have been more aware of the world around me. But it worked out for me. But there's this old, Ray Kroc had a great saying from McDonald's. He said, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." And then the other one he had was, "Turn your fear into faith." And I did both of those. And turn my fear into faith that I could, and I as long as I focused on where I wanted to go and how I wanted to do it, what my values were, and how I wanted to do it, then things would work out, and they did.
Right.
I was lucky too. You got to have luck in life, and there's an old adage that I love. When I was, I'd just gotten divorced, and I had a little girl that was, she was about 2 years old, and I moved into this little tiny apartment, and I was so distraught, leaving my little girl, And one day I was driving home from work, and there was this big billboard, and it said, "Luck is where preparation, where luck is where." Oh, my brain just went dead. Uh, where opportunity meets preparation.
Okay.
Luck is where opportunity meets preparation, and it is so true.
Yeah.
Is that you got to be, when opportunity comes along, you need to be prepared for it, and you need to recognize it, and that's where luck comes into. And I've been lucky along the way. I've had great mentors along the way, and I've had I recognized opportunities as they came, and I was able to take them, because of my background. And I added value to the world. I was even as size a company that Starbucks became, I was still a small business person at heart.
Right.
I realized that it was about treating one person at a time. It was one customer at a time, one cup of coffee at a time. It wasn't any more than that. It didn't make any difference whether you had one store or 10,000 stores. It was always the same.
Oh, by the way, it's never too late to go back to college and get a degree if you want now.
That's true. At 75, I could do it, right?
And so talk about Starbucks. The saying goes that the first time you interview for Starbucks, you didn't meet any of the qualifications. Not only didn't you not have a college degree, forget about a high school degree, but
Right.
You didn't even get in the first time you were interviewed by Howard.
Right.
And how did you end up getting into Starbucks?
Well, so I'd been president of a land development company in Seattle, and I was trying to, and the company, we had to sell the company, it got in trouble, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I said, I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I want to buy a company. So I got interested in the specialty food industry, and along the way, I knew a guy, one of the founders of Costco, a guy named Jeff Brotman. And Jeff was on the board of this little tiny coffee company called Starbucks. And he said, you got to go talk to Howard Schultz. He's looking for somebody that has experience. You might be a good fit there. And so I made him, he set up a meeting for me with Howard, and I went to talk to Howard. And Howard was looking for a vice president of operation. He only had 28 stores at the time, so it was a very small company. And so we sat down and we had breakfast and we talked, and Howard had this list of things that he wanted in a person. He wanted somebody with a college degree, somebody with food service experience. And it went through the whole list. And finally at number 10, can you breathe? Yes, I can breathe. But that was the only qualification that I had. And so Howard, and I really didn't want to work for somebody. And Howard and I shook hands and said, nice to meet you and good luck for both of you. We both wish good luck to each other. And so I finally found a company to buy. And the only person I knew that had any money was my brother-in-law. So I went to my brother-in-law and said, Kenny, will you loan me some money to buy this business? And so he said yes, but it was a franchise for a company called Hickory Farms. And they sold salami and cheeses and stuff like that. And it was some people that I knew, some older guys that didn't have any kids to give the business to. And they owned the franchise for Oregon, Washington, British Columbia. And so I pitched my idea to Ken, and he said, there's somebody that I know that knows a lot about franchising. And I'd like to talk to him and get his input. Let's you and I go meet him. And there's a guy named Jack Rogers. He happened to be one of the first investors that Howard Schultz got when he bought Starbucks. And so we went to meet Jack, and Jack was in the Starbucks building. He had an office there. So we went there and we sat down. I pitched my heart out to Jack, and Jack just looked at me and said, why do you want to do something like that? We need a guy like you right here at Starbucks. And I said, I related the story. He said, yeah, but things have changed. We still haven't filled that position. You would be perfect. And he says, I want you to talk to a couple more people. You could have heard my brother-in-law's sigh of relief all the way to New York, probably all the way to Brooklyn, if he didn't have to loan me any money. So I went and talked to people, and I talked to Howard again. And, I said, okay, let me think about it. And I said to Howard, why don't you let me work in the company for a week? I'll work for free. You don't pay me. And at the end of the week, if you think you like me, and if I like the company, then if you still want me, then let's talk. And so I worked there for a week. I worked in the plant for 2 or 3 days. I worked on the trucks for 2 or 3 days, and I worked in the stores for 2 or 3 days, a couple of days. And at the end of that week, I came to the conclusion that this place fit me like a glove, because I saw that it wasn't in the coffee business probably before anybody did, that it was in the people business. And I coined this phrase early on when I was with the company, that we weren't in the coffee business serving people, but we were in the people business serving coffee. And so Howard extended an invitation for me to join. And instead of buying that company, I turned right. And instead of buying a company, I turned right and joined Starbucks. So, it was a break that I got because I knew Jeff Brotman, and I got the opportunity to work in the company. And, it came at me twice. So I figured if it's coming at me twice, somebody's talking to me. And so it's where luck happened, where opportunity met preparation.
Exactly. It's also divine providence. It all came together.
Yeah, it all came together.
Wow.
So
So,
I spent 21 years there,
wow.
and I was on the board for 12, and in operations for about 12.
So there's so many questions that I personally have, about scale, about this and that. But, the main question, I wanted to ask you regarding this experience is that you're known as a person of love and of kindness and of giving. In our society, we glorify the leaders that, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, which led by force and led by, putting the employee down sometimes. We hear
Yeah,
all about the experiences of Elon Musk screaming and shouting at employees, but
yeah,
you're known to do the whole entire opposite effect.
yeah, yeah. I don't believe in that. I think there now that let me say that. So I'm a believer in servant leadership, and
Right.
I've been a follower of servant leadership in my mid-20s when I first got the little pamphlet from Robert
Right.
Greenlee.
But let's talk about you came across servant leadership through your own pain point, right?
Yes, yes, I did. Well, I had the actions. I didn't have the words behind it. So you're right. I mean, I live in a city that has got a lot of technology, a lot of great companies. Uh, you know, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, when they led Microsoft, weren't very kind people.
Right.
They were abusers. And they, because of how they acted, when things got tough, they lost 15 years of a company's experience. The new guy comes in who had been there, and he changes the whole company, and he becomes a people-led company again, about people. And Microsoft just turned around because of it. I mean, it was simple as that. I mean, it was more complex than that at some levels, but it was basically simple as that. Steve Jobs was a different kind of story. Steve Jobs never lied about who he was. He said, "I'm a weirdo. This is who I am." He was the classic merchant, actually. He was a merchant in technology. He could see around corners. He see what people would want before they saw it themselves. And was he a great guy? No. But he was an honest guy about who he was. The guy that ran Uber was not. And which was amazing that the board let him go. I mean, he was not a good guy. The guy that just ran WeWork, another, and the problem is there are many times that entrepreneurs, they so are caught up in themselves and what they believe in that, they say everybody should do it like me. I'm God. And they're not, and every one of those people had somebody in their company that practiced leading in a different way and that calmed the company down in some way or another. The ones that didn't, like Uber, where they didn't have that person, it did blow up, and Microsoft blew up, although they had lots of money, but they had, when you have monopoly, you can do everything wrong and still do fine. And so those things just aren't the way I believe in leading. And I think I've proven to be right. If I look at a company like Salesforce.com with Benioff, leads great way. Nordstrom, Costco. I mean, human-led companies. I think they, over the long period of time, they may not always be successful monetarily because lots of things change in the economy, but they'll always have a healthy organization. The ones that don't do that have unhealthy organizations. People leave, they don't want to work there, they abuse each other, they go home, they abuse their kids. It's not how we should live our lives.
Right. So you mentioned before, servant leadership, which is your guiding principles. How do you implement culture within take a company like Starbucks, for example, which has probably, I'm going to assume, over 100,000 employees worldwide.
500,000 employees.
500,000 employees. How do you scale and instill culture in such a large organization? And I'm assuming for another entrepreneur listening that has a small organization, anywhere between 10 to 20, 30, how do you create a culture and instill it and, people to live by it?
Well, that old adage, people don't care what you say, right? They care what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's what you do that counts. cultures are reflections of leadership,
Right.
of how leadership acts, about leadership's values, about how leaders respond to crisis, how leaders respond to success. You know, they're totally reflective of leadership. And it's so and so leaders create cultures by what they do and how they act with people. When somebody makes a mistake, what do they do? What are the penalties? When somebody does something well, what are the rewards and recognition? And how do they treat their people? And how do they treat the people that they serve? Are they cheaters? Do they cheat their customers? Do they give more to their customers? Do they reward their employees? You know, do they share the wealth? Or are they all about themselves and what they can get? And so you are who you are, and your company is who you are. And there's no escape from that. You know, you can say, if you say, you know, you hear this all the time, people are our greatest asset, right? But, you know, when people say that, it makes me cringe because people aren't assets, they're human beings. Assets are things you own. You don't own human beings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, assets always give you what you expect. If you have a computer and you press the button, you know, 99 out of 100 times that computer is going to turn on. If you go to start your delivery truck, 99 out of 100 that delivery truck's going to start. When people do things, you know, they make mistakes. So you're not going to get what you always expect, you know, and so we have to be able to deal with that.
Right.
And you have to deal with it in a productive way, in a kind and gentle way, in a loving way. And, you know, I used to say that, you know, love is important in companies. It's not the same kind of love that the familial love that you'll have with your kids or your spouse or your family. It's the kind of love that you would have because they're human beings and because you love other human beings. And that just makes a difference. So if your culture is unhealthy, it's because you're unhealthy.
Right. So then,
That's simple.
right. So then, how do we go about? And this is change, like you mentioned. So, culture is a reflection of the person in charge to a certain degree. Yeah. And if you want the culture to change, you personally have to change your values.
Yeah, you have to change, and then you have to practice with that. So if you don't have your values written down as a leader, and the values of the company aren't written down, how do people know how you're going to act and how that you should be judged and held accountable? Because leaders need to be held accountable also.
Right.
And so they don't know what you signed up for. And so you have to let everybody know what your values are, what those things mean. And then you have to, so you ask about how do you do it within a company of hundreds of thousands of people. The way I did it was by giving the same speech over and over again, by acting consistently with what my values were. If I said I love people, it meant I love people. I had to love people coming in the door as much as going out the door as much as I loved them when they came in the door. And I had to treat people with respect and dignity, you know, and I had to make sure that people that did a good job got recognized and rewarded, and that people that struggled, they got coached, not just chastised. Mm-hmm. And they got helped along the way. Now, sometimes you had to let people go, but you had to do it with care and love.
Right.
You know? And I always believed that you had to trust people before they gave you trust. Mm-hmm. That you give trust before you get trust. And so, you know, people could pretty much, I mean, was I a perfect human being? No, I am not. You know, I had a temper. I got disappointed how I acted, and disappointment sometimes. I wasn't perfect. But I had so many rocks on the positive scale, and I had good intent about myself. Right. When I screwed up, I knew I'd screwed up, and I went and cleaned up my mess before anybody asked me to clean up my mess. And so, you know, it's how you live your life. So you got to write down your values, what you're about, what your mission statement is. Why are all your people working at your company? Mm-hmm. Why are they there? What's the greater purpose of the organization? Just to make you rich? No, I hope not. You know, that doesn't mean that money isn't important, but that can't be the driving force, you know. You know, and you're there to serve your people, and your journey of serving your people, helping them achieve what they want out of their lives, they'll help you get what you want out of your life and help the organization grow and be successful.
Right. You know, you give, like you said, you got to water the plant, give the ability to the people, help them, encourage them, you know, inspire them within them. You know, Howard, someone that like yourself that has achieved so much success, you know, in their career. They say all the years through Starbucks and afterwards. How do you keep so humility? How do you have so much humility? And especially when you were leading Starbucks, how do you even have that?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I never, you know, I just was a product of my family, you know. My mother used to always say, Howard, just put your head down and do the work.
Right.
And I have an ego like other people have, of course. But I never let it get in my way. I was always, I have this, we all have this little board of directors that sits on our shoulders and they're talking to us all the time. And, I have one board member that always tell me, Howard, you're fantastic. If I give a great speech somewhere, because, hey, Howard, that was a great speech. You're amazing. And then I have another one that says, hey, Howard, don't get caught up in yourself. You're not that good, you know? And, I have another one that, keeps me honest. And they're talking to me all the time. And I've learned to listen to them. And I try to listen to the ones that coach me the best. The one that's always telling me how great I am, I give him that one a little tiny bit of room. But the one that says, hey, Howard, you're not that good. Stay humble. I give more room to that one.
Right.
Because that's what got me to the party. That's who I am.
Wow. So then your own self-development growth process, I'm assuming, has changed throughout the year.
Yes.
As your career grew, as your family grew, as you went through your own personal development changes, what are some of the changes that happened, and what are some of the steps that you took in order to create those changes that we could, for people like ourselves, could implement and learn from?
Well, first of all, we all need other people to help us,
Right.
to coach us, to mentor us, whatever it happens to be. And those people are all over the place. They're not just your superiors. Most of the time, they're the people that report to you or the people that you work with, or your family, your spouse, your kids, your grandkids. It's amazing what I've learned from my grandkids. And so you got to be open to learning from anybody about yourself. And that's a journey of life. And you got to be aware of that. And you got to be curious about yourself and about life. And you have to read about other people, how they accomplish things. Read about great leaders that you think are leaders like you'd want to be. Read about Desmond Tutu. Read about Abraham Lincoln. Read about George Washington. Read about Steve Jobs. Read about Bill Gates. Read about people that you want to learn, the good, the bad, and the ugly, not just the ones that that mirror you. Read about the ones that don't mirror you, because you want to know what doesn't work for you as well as what does work for you.
Right.
Who don't you want to be as well as who you want to be. And so I've done that my whole life. I've always looked up to others, and I've always learned from others and the people that, when I'd made a mistake and people came to me, I had a door that was, you hear that open door, but it wasn't just an open door, it was an open mind, which is more importantly an open door. And I learned to listen with my eyes as well as my ears,
Mm-hmm.
and with my antenna, about what was going on. And so my life is a journey of learning, and I still learn about myself. I learn about others, and I'm curious, and that's what you need to be throughout your whole life. And I'm still changing. I'm still growing. I'm like every other a male in this United States. I'm a problem solver. And when my wife would come home, she got her PhD in social work, and she'd come home after doing something. She was frustrated about something, and I wanted to solve her problem.
Yeah.
And what she wanted me to do was listen. It took me the longest time to figure that out. And my kids were the same way. And one day I was reading this book, and there was this little 2-word quote. And it was one of those enlightening times. I had quotes on my office wall everywhere. And when I had my office. And the 2-word quote goes like this: compassionate emptiness. Compassionate emptiness. It means be full of compassion, but empty of opinion, empty of solutions. And that was an aha moment in my life. And I learned to be compassionate, to learn to listen without having to solve her problems or even trying to.
Right. Wow. What problem did you try to solve today?
What
problem did you try to solve today for your wife?
Well, you name it. I always have an opinion. She's a great writer, and I always think she should write a book. She did write a big book. She was an oncology social worker and got her PhD, and she wrote she and 2 other women wrote Handbook for Oncology Social Workers. But I always wanted her to write, some fiction or something, and it's because she's such a great writer. So I've learned to just shut up and let her decide what she wants to do in her life.
What's the famous saying? Behind every great man is even a better woman.
Oh, yeah, absolutely true.
So you obviously had your corner, I guess your boxing corner was stacked with people that were there to support you and enable you to become the best version of yourself.
Yeah,
right?
but you had to be aware of it. You had to listen. Even times when it was painful.
Yeah.
You had to be able to listen and internalize, and then figure out what that meant to you and how you would bring that alive in your own life. It's not just the good times and the people that say, "Atta boy, Howard, that was fantastic." It's the ones that say, "Hey, Howard, you could have been a little better here."
Right. Being able to accept negative criticism of ourselves.
Now, let's not call it negative criticism. Let's not even call it criticism. Let's just call it good coaching.
Good coaching. I like that even better. So then, with all this good coaching that you had, you know, for for the positive and for the not positive, in order to become the best version of yourself, what are some non-obvious habits that you're able to implement within yourself that helped you grow?
Um, well, I think learning to manage my emotions
Right.
better. It's not doesn't mean I'm not emotional. I still am, but making sure that those emotions didn't get so carried away that they hurt others.
Right.
And so I had to learn to manage that. Um, I had to learn how to let somebody go in an organization in a productive way. How did you, like I said, how did you love them as much going out the door as you loved them coming in the door? And so I had to learn to do that. Another thing is that I had to learn to absolutely trust people. I have a saying, the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom. So I bring people into the organization, and I had to learn to have faith and let them make mistakes. Don't let them bet the farm, but let them make mistakes, and then and coach them and talk to them about it. And so I had to learn to do that. And it's all those little human things that we learn along our journey in life.
Right. Wow. I mean, and we're going to talk, I guess, like you're saying, you just said right now, let the person who sweeps, let him choose the broom.
Yeah.
He's the floor to choose the broom. And you mentioned a few times, I've heard, that's the famous story how, Frappuccino came about.
Right.
And but that ability of giving people, I guess, the autonomy within an organization, when it's in their life, to make those choices is such an important thing.
Yeah.
Right. So first of all, how do we give people the ability how do we build organizations that we give people the ability to have autonomy and make a decision without having them to fear any type of backlash from doing these types of things?
Well, it means when you give people responsibility, you have to give them the ability to make a mistake,
Right.
without, unjust criticism, so to speak. You have to be willing to see what's going on and what they did, and then have a conversation, but a positive conversation.
Right.
Now, if somebody's doing the same mistake over and over and over again, then it's time for a more serious conversation of what's going on, what aren't they getting, and what do you own of it. And then sometimes there's a point in time where they just don't fit. Sometimes a person that's fantastic, doing everything right, all of a sudden blows up.
Mm-hmm.
Something's happening in their life that you don't know about, and you have to figure that out. So you have to trust your people. Now, like I said, you give trust until trust is not deserved.
Mm-hmm.
And then you deal with that in a different way. But it's like with your kids. If you constantly have the reins and you're constantly pulling tight, and so it's hurting their jaw, what do your kids want to do? They want to escape that because it's painful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have some reins, but they got to be loose tight.
Right.
You got to give them space, and you got to let them make mistakes. They got to understand what the values of your family are.
Mm-hmm.
And why, and then you got to give them trust. One of the things I always did for our kids was we'd put money in a cup in the kitchen, and they could take money out of that cup anytime they wanted if it was for something that they was serious. Like if they went to a party and they maybe when they were young and they underage and they had a drink and they didn't want to drive or they didn't want to ride with somebody, they could take a taxi and go get money from that cup. And I never asked them a question once.
Right.
With them using that money. I just would make sure it was in there. I always kept about $50 in that cup. Right. And so, you have to look past, you have to trust them. And, you have to give them room and say, I trust you. You go ahead and you're going to make mistakes in your life. Just don't do something stupid. Right. Don't drink and drive. Don't drive with somebody that's drunk. Don't, if you're going to do those things, then take care of yourself, take a taxi home.
So you mentioned before, creating values and creating, your 5-year goal. Is that something you also did together with your kids while they were growing up?
Yes. Yeah, we'd have family meetings and
Really?
we talk about values and goals in the family. My wife and I had planning sessions,
Oh, wow.
and we would go away for a weekend and we would have these headings and we'd each go in our own spaces. We had these big sheets of paper, the white sheets of paper with a sticky on the back, and we'd put the headings up and each would go in a separate room and we write what our goals were under those headings. Now, we were each individuals. She was an oncology social worker, wanted to get an education. When we got married, she didn't even have a degree, and she got her undergraduate, she got a graduate degree, and then a PhD. Well, we had to agree that that was going to take money and time, and so she wouldn't
Right.
be working. And that was be part of our planning session. We had spiritual goals together. We had goals for our marriage, but each of us also had our own personal goals, what we wanted to do in those days we call it our careers. Now we call it our life's work.
Right.
But what did we want to do? And so then we'd come back together and we'd present to each other. And there would be conflicts sometimes, like she wasn't going to work and I would be the only breadwinner. And so how are we going to deal with that? Or I was going to travel a lot, so she'd be taking care of the kids. What did that mean to her while she was going to school? And we had to sort through all that stuff. And we had material goals, things we wanted, a new car, what kind of house we wanted, those kinds of things. But we do those things together.
Wow.
And then those would be, those goals, we had 1, 3, and 5-year plans. And it's amazing what we accomplished because of that.
If people only did that now, before they got into a relationship or got married,
Right.
it would be a whole different ballgame.
If you talked about your values, really had deep conversation. What matters to you?
Right.
How many people get married and, they wake up in the morning and they say, I have this deal about learning to wear one hat. The hat that defines not that all the multiple hats, the different jobs we have, but the hat that defines who we are as a human being. So you get up in the morning and you look across the bed and you say, I better put on my spouse hat. You might be married to the wrong spouse. Or you go to work and you say, gee, I better put on my Startbucks hat. You're probably working at the wrong company, because you need to be able to be you in all facets of your life. And so, why would you wouldn't walk down the street, and some people do, and say, I'm going to marry that person. You might say, I'm really attracted to that person because she's really pretty or he's very handsome.
How did you find your wife?
Huh?
How did you find your wife? Walking down the street?
No, it was a blind date. Yeah. But, we talked a lot about values and about who we were and what we wanted out of life before we got married. And then we built a relationship. We'd create this plan for ourselves, and it kept us together throughout the years. Didn't mean we didn't have problems or arguments. We did, but not the big things. It was always the small things. So yeah, why wouldn't you do that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, that's mind blowing. And one of the things you mentioned, I think, just is such an important thing, is that you're going to have arguments. You're going to have arguments still. But if the values are aligned, you'll have the foundation to overcome and build even beyond that, and more than that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you do. And you deal with your problems because you're both going in the same direction. You might have individual things you want to accomplish in life, but your family's going in the same direction. So if you got an issue with your kids, we had a nuclear family. My wife had a son who was 4 when we met, and I had a daughter, who was 6 when we met, and I had a daughter that was 2. And so how did you bring those kids together? Well, there were conflicts in there. Right. We each kind of were at times protecting our own child, and we had to learn how to get out of that mode and how to do that. And so we got help, and then we had to have conversations with our children, and we had family meetings. We did lots of things that helped, but they weren't without conflict, and we learned to deal with it over time.
Howard, you're in the wrong profession. You should become a family therapist.
Yeah, right. Sometimes I think I am.
I mean, you're known to be a man that's helped a lot.
Yeah.
And you're known to be a man that's given a tremendous amount of, love and courage and kindness and time and everything, which is absolutely incredible. But, when you look back now, right, when you think, how do you value your life? And how do you want to be remembered to people and everything around you?
Well, my mission is to nurture and inspire the human spirit. That's how I live my life. And I want to be remembered as a person of great purpose, of great passion, persistence, all those 6 P's, of patience, of a person that gets the job done, and a person who cares about people. When I am sitting in a nursing home in my rocking chair, I want to be remembered as a person that did nurture and inspire other human beings, and that's how I want to live my life, and that's what I try to do every day.
Well, hopefully you'll never need to get to nursing home rocking chair, because no
Yeah,
doubt in my mind, you have another 30, 40, 50, 60 years
yeah.
willing.
Well, maybe I don't think I'll live as long as Moses, but who knows?
So your 5 year, so do you still create your 5 year plan then? Now?
Yeah, I'm not as disciplined about it as I used to be, because at 76 years old, it's hard. But we still do have goals of what we want to accomplish, and we do have plans for what we do. Matter of fact, we just started a couple of weeks ago, started working on a new plan.
Wow. And you inspire me to be, I mean, there's no words to describe Howard. But, if you wanted, let's imagine, for example, young Howard,
Yeah,
just, leaving high school, never made it to college.
yeah,
But that's even if you did go to college or didn't go to college, but he has a whole entire world in front of him. You could go work on a farm somewhere in Seattle. You could, go ahead and start your own business. You could maybe even become a barista in Starbucks later on in your life after it was founded.
yeah.
What message would you tell your younger self?
To figure out who you are, number one. Number one agenda item is, what are your values? How do those values turn into actions and decisions you make in your life, so that you're directed? Figure out why you're here. What's your mission in life? What is it that you want to leave behind? Now, when you're young, sometimes it's harder to see that view, but you can work on it. You can change it. Remember, everything is written in pencil. You can erase everything. And then, why are you here? What is it? Why are you here? What are the things um, how do you want to live your life? And then have a plan. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve in your life? It doesn't have to be complicated. You can, again, you should have spiritual goals. You should have personal goals, personal growth goals. What do you want to accomplish? Who do you want to meet in your life? Who are people that you'd like to meet? Who do you want to have a conversation with? And write all this stuff down. If you don't write it down, it's just bullshit, excuse the expression. Be committed, get committed to something in your life. And then you may have a goal of 20 of your goals, you may want to start a business. And then how are you going to do that? What kind of business is it going to be? How are you going to treat your people? When I left the company that was in the land development business, I had written down all the things that I wanted to do, what kind of company I wanted to lead, how I was going to do things. And one of the things I had, that everybody in the company was going to get to vote on their own area of expertise. And I changed that to, the person who sweeps the floor should choose the room. Mm-hmm. Everybody was going to have equity in the company. And we did that at Starbucks, and people were going to be treated with respect and dignity. We did all those things. And so, you better know where you're going. That's all I can say. And it better be written down if you really want to accomplish it. If you want to live a fulfilling life, which has happiness, disappointment, love, care, anxiety, failure, success, which goes into a fulfilling life, mm-hmm. Right? Then you need to write these things down so you know where you're going. Right. Then you're going to be able to deal with all the challenges and all the joys that life brings.
Right. Wow. How can I make you my rabbi? How can I?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know if I'd be a good rabbi.
I think you definitely have the look. You definitely have the wisdom for it, and you'll be incredible.
Yeah.
But Howard, I want to thank you so much for this. I mean, there's so much that I personally learned in our short discussion right now, which definitely have to have a continuation another time, because there's so many things we still didn't get to. But there's not only inspire me, but there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to inspire multiple other people, and you already do. You already inspire multiple people through all your travels around the world and the people you speak to through your books and through your conversations you have and through your speeches. But this too is going to inspire so many other people on how to live their life based upon true, real values in order for them to make the biggest impact here within their own surroundings. And that way it could change the whole entire world. Because like, as as a small human being in this world with 6 billion people, I could think, who am I to make a big difference, impact in this world? But if I could change myself, then I could change someone else. And that person could change someone else, which creates a whole entire domino effect. So
why not me? Everybody can do it. Why not you? You can do what you set out to do.
Yes, exactly. So and it's mind-blowing. We all could do it. We all have the power within us to do it.
Yeah.
And, you're on that mission to help me and everyone else learn about that process, that we have the power and the mission to do it. So really, thank you so, so much.
Okay, thanks, Ephraim. I appreciate the opportunity.